everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Heidi from My Reading Life, and I'm here today to film a review of The Seed Keeper by Diane Wilson. This was the November pick for the Book Naturalists book club, and it also fits for Indigathon because Diane Wilson is a Indigenous writer. She is of the Dakota people. And this is our first attempt to read fiction in the Book Naturalists book club this year, and it was highly successful for me, I have to say. It has not been a stellar year for fiction for me. I have very much enjoyed nonfiction more than fiction for the most part. But if I had been reading novels like this all year, it probably would have been a lot different. I thought this was an incredibly moving and thoughtful novel all about one woman, Rosalie Ironwing, who is herself an Indigenous woman. And her story is a story not only of her own life, because the book tells her life story in a non-linear way, but it is also, while telling her individual story, is also telling the story of what has happened to Indigenous people in the United States. So I loved the fact that by telling this one individual story, you could look at the things that had happened to an entire group of people. I really appreciated how the author was able to pull those themes together. So this story, as I said, is told in a non-linear way. But it's very easy to keep track of because each chapter has the heading of whose perspective we're going to hear from. Mostly all the chapters are from Rosalie's perspective, but there are a few chapters from her friend Gabby's perspective, also from her great-grandmother's perspective, Maria, and there may be a few others in there. But as well as telling whose perspective we're going to be hearing from, the chapter heading tells the year. So while you're going back and forth in time to get the pieces of Rosalie's story and her family's story, you're also always grounded in what time you're in because of the way the chapter headings are listed out there. So I appreciated that very much. So Rosalie is a very complex character. She, at a young age, loses her mother and then loses her father as well as when she's a teenager, an early teen. She gets sent to foster care with white families, so she gets taken out of her Indigenous community and sent to live in the white community with foster parents, different ones. She does not have an easy time of it. She does not fit in well. She's sort of a quiet, keep to herself kind of a person, and she experiences a lot of trauma in her life. And that is one thing that this book is doing. It is exploring the consequences of generational trauma and how what happens in one generation perpetuates itself through the future generations. And I think this book tells that, uses that theme and explains that concept better than almost anything else I've ever read about intergenerational trauma. So I very much appreciated that as part of this story as well. The other thing you're learning is interactions between tribal members and the white community in a historical sense, from when Indigenous folks were removed from their land and sent out of state to a different place, and then have slowly come back to their homeland and what that's like. It tells about living in a community where the white people drove your community out, and that those conflicts and those feelings and those resentments still exist today, even though it didn't happen between these specific people, right? It happened, hundreds of years, or not hundreds of years ago, 100 years ago or more. But that tension still exists in between the white community and the Indigenous community. Those stereotypes of Native Americans come into play in this story, and Rosalie has to deal with all of that. So as she's experiencing all of these things, you see her individual experience of those issues, but you also get to see how this applies to the wider Indigenous community. So it's just very, very well done and very, very compelling. And then on top of all of that social issue stuff, there is a wonderful theme running throughout of connection to nature, how information is passed from generation to generation about how to care for nature, not only wild nature, but seeds and planting and growing food for your family and growing food for your community survival. That is a very strong theme throughout. Who carries that knowledge in your community, and who is there to teach the new generations about caring for the land, caring for the seeds, growing the food, providing the home, providing the connection between all of you in the community so that you can survive, because survival of your community is more important than survival of the individual. It just so emotional, and also just thought-provoking, really lovely descriptions of the setting, which is in Minnesota, in the northern part of the United States, along the Minnesota River. Just gorgeous nature and landscape descriptions, and of the animals and the birds and the grasslands and just all of that. It was very, very lovely to read. And then not only does this story delve into this whole concept of how is knowledge passed down through the generations, particularly when it comes to seeds and growing things and caring for the land and caring for the woodlands and caring for the creatures around you. But this also contrasts that way of life with the modern agricultural way of life. There's a Monsanto lookalike company that comes into this farming community that Rosalie has to deal with, because she has, she's living on a farm at this point, married to a farmer. And so she has to confront that reality of what industrial agriculture is doing to the land, how that method and how that movement to industrialize agriculture conflicts with what she has always known to be right for the land, what her people have always known is right for the land, and how to care for the land and grow food and live in harmony with nature. And I very much appreciated that aspect of the story as well. So, fabulous book, and I just want to say that my reading of this book was enhanced by my other Indigathon reading this month. I finished this memoir, Carrie, by Toni Jenson. This is a memoir of a Métis woman and her life growing up, also intergenerational trauma in here, also removal of Indigenous peoples from their homelands and forced placement in other places in the country, not where they were from. This had many of the same elements as The Seed Keeper, and also Half-Breed by Maria Campbell. That book, again, another memoir of an Indigenous Métis woman and her, from an earlier time. That memoir was first published in 1973, so she has a much different perspective as a woman from a different generation. But this idea of intergenerational trauma, how these things that happened to people in the past continue to perpetuate into the future, all running throughout all three of these books. So I would highly recommend, if you read and enjoy Seed Keeper and you want to do further reading into this area, Half-Breed by Maria Campbell and Carrie by Toni Jenson, both excellent further reading in this sort of area, although those books are memoirs and this book is a fiction piece. So yeah, another highly successful book for the Book Naturalist Book Club, and I want to just I'm so thankful that we've had the Book Naturalist Book Club to introduce me to all of these books and these authors. So would very much recommend this if you haven't already read it. So for next month we'll be reading Seed to Dust, Life, Nature, and a Country Garden by Marc Hamer. So I hope you can join us in reading this in the month of December. I hope you're all doing well and finding some great books to read, and I will talk to you later.